The TikTok video started with a shaky camera movement, then steadied to reveal something horrifying. In the dim light of a back room, Mrs. Yewande, the famous cook who had transformed her village recipes into a restaurant empire, was doing something unspeakable to the food. The footage lasted only 20 seconds, but it was enough to destroy 15 years of success, 5 restaurants, and a reputation that stretched from her small village in Oyo State to the bustling streets of Lagos. But to understand how this successful businesswoman became Nigeria's most notorious food scandal, we need to go back to where it all began in a small village 3 hours from Lagos. In Ilaro village, everyone knew about Mama Yewande's food. Her small roadside kitchen served travelers and villagers alike. The aroma of her cooking drew people from neighboring villages, and soon her name spread beyond the dusty paths of Ilaro to the highways leading to Lagos. Drivers would stop specifically at her kitchen, telling stories in the city about the village woman whose food tasted like nothing else in Nigeria. Yewande's success was a source of pride for Ilaro. Unlike others who had left for Lagos, she chose to stay, building her business from a wooden shack into a proper restaurant. She used local ingredients, employed village youth, and maintained the traditional cooking methods her grandmother had taught her. But there was something unusual about how she served her meals. Each plate had to pass through her private room before reaching the customer. At first, people assumed it was where she added her secret spices. In the village, such mysteries were common. Every great cook had their secrets. But as her fame grew and she opened her first Lagos restaurant in Surulere, this habit raised more questions. Chioma Phillips first heard about Yewande's food from her grandmother in Ilaro. During her monthly visits to the village, her grandmother would talk endlessly about the local girl who had become a Lagos success story. Chioma, who worked as an investigative journalist for a major Lagos newspaper, was more interested in the strange serving ritual everyone mentioned. Why does she need to take every plate into a private room? Chioma asked her grandmother one evening. Some say it's where she prays over the food, her grandmother replied. Others think she adds special ingredients, but no one really knows. All we know is that her food makes you feel different, happier. Somehow, Chioma's journalistic instincts were triggered. She had built her career exposing corruption in Lagos's food industry restaurant chains, using dangerous preservatives, fake foreign ingredients, expired products repackaged as fresh. But this was different. This was personal, a story that connected her village roots to her city life. She began her investigation quietly. In Lagos, she visited all 5 of Yewande's restaurants. Each had the same setup, a small private room where every plate had to pass through before serving. The staff were polite, but evasive when asked about it. In the village, she talked to former employees, but they either knew nothing or wouldn't speak. Then she met Sarah, a young waitress who had worked at both the village restaurant and the Lagos branches. Sarah had recently been fired for asking too many questions about the private room. Something isn't right, Sarah told Chioma in a small cafe far from any of Yewande's restaurants. I've worked in many restaurants, but I've never seen anything like this. And there's something else, something about her son. Yewande's son, Tund, was a mystery himself. Few people knew that 15 years ago, when he was just 5 years old, doctors had given him only months to live. He had suffered from a strange illness that made him weaker each day. Modern medicine had failed him. That was when Yewande, desperate and alone, had taken him to see a powerful medicine man in a remote village. The medicine man gave her a choice, Sarah explained. He told her she could save her son, but the price would be her dignity and the dignity of everyone who ate her food. Chioma leaned forward. What do you mean? Sarah looked around nervously before continuing. I never saw inside that room, but one day I heard sounds, disturbing sounds. And there was a smell, just for a moment before she opened the door. When I asked her about it, she fired me the next day. Armed with this information, Chioma devised a plan. She contacted a friend who specialized in miniature cameras and had one disguised as a wall nail. Sarah still had friends working at the village restaurant who helped them install it in the private room late one night. The next day, Chioma sat in her Lagos office, watching the live feed on her laptop. For hours, she saw the same pattern plates going in, Yewande entering alone, then the food going out. Then, at exactly 2:47 p.m., everything changed. The footage showed Yewande doing something so revolting, so unthinkable to the food that Chioma nearly vomited. She quickly downloaded the video, her hand shaking, but before she could decide what to do with it, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "I know you have the footage," a young man's voice said. "I'm Tund, Yewande's son. Please, before you do anything, let me tell you the whole story." They met at a quiet restaurant in Victoria Island. Tund, now 20, looked healthy and strong. Nothing like the dying child he had been. He spoke softly, his eyes fixed on his untouched glass of water. 15 years ago, I was dying," he began. "The doctors in Lagos had given up. The specialists in London said nothing could be done. My mother took me everywhere: India, America, Germany. Nothing worked. I was getting weaker every day." He described how his mother had heard about a powerful medicine man who lived in a forest village near the Benin border. The village was so remote it didn't appear on any map. They traveled for 2 days to reach it. "The medicine man told my mother that evil spirits were feeding on my life force," Tun continued. "He said the only way to save me was to trap these spirits in other people's food. But for the trap to work, my mother had to—" He paused, unable to say the words. "Contaminate the food," Chioma finished. Tun nodded. He gave her a powder to drink and told her that as long as she continued this ritual, I would live. If she ever stopped, the spirits would return and kill me within days. "But that's just superstition," Chioma said. "You're healthy now. You don't need—" 3 years ago, Tund interrupted. "My mother tried to stop. She felt guilty about what she was doing to people. Within 2 days, I collapsed. The doctors couldn't explain it. As soon as she resumed her ritual, I recovered completely." Chioma sat back, her mind racing. The story seemed impossible, yet here was living proof sitting across from her. She thought about her own mother, what she might do in a similar situation. The line between right and wrong, once so clear, began to blur. But she was a journalist. She had a duty to the truth, to public health, to the thousands of people eating contaminated food without their knowledge. "I have to expose this," she said finally. "People have a right to know." Tun's eyes filled with tears. "I understand, but please wait until tomorrow. Give me time to tell her myself. She should hear it from me first." Chioma agreed. But when she woke up the next morning, she discovered someone had already posted the video. A rival journalist, seeing the feed on her laptop during a late-night office cleaning, had recorded it on his phone and uploaded it to social media. The video went viral instantly. News channels picked it up. Health inspectors descended on all 5 restaurants. The police arrested Yewande as she tried to explain about her son, the medicine man, the impossible choice she had made. The investigation that followed uncovered more than anyone expected. Reporters traced the medicine man, finding a trail of desperate parents who had made similar deals. Some had died rather than comply with his demands. Others had gone mad with guilt. The medicine man himself had vanished, leaving behind evidence of a complex scheme of manipulation and blackmail. But he couldn't explain Tun's miraculous recovery or his sudden decline when Yewande stopped her ritual. The court case became national news. Medical experts testified about Tun's inexplicable illness and recovery. Religious leaders debated the moral implications. Social media exploded with opposing views, some calling for Yewande's head, others defending a mother's desperate choice. The judge's verdict reflected this complexity. Yewande was sentenced to 3 years in prison for food contamination, but with consideration for her maternal desperation and the manipulation she had faced. 2 years into her sentence, Chioma visited Yewande in prison. The once proud restaurateur had aged decades and months, but her eyes still held the same determination that had built her empire. "I would do it all again," Yewande said quietly. "Every parent knows we would do anything for our children. Prison is nothing compared to watching your child die. But what about all those people?" Chioma asked. "All those years of deception." "I ask God for forgiveness every day," Yewande replied. "I hope that somehow the happiness my food brought to people might balance the sin of how I prepared it. Was I wrong? Probably, but I was also right as a mother. The story became a modern Nigerian parable, discussed in villages and cities alike. It raised questions about maternal love, desperation, tradition, and modernity. Some saw Yewande as a monster who had built an empire on disgust. Others saw a mother trapped between tradition and survival, making an impossible choice in a world where medicine and magic still intertwine. After her release, Yewande returned to her village, never cooking for others again. Her restaurants were sold, their names changed, their histories erased. But Tun remained healthy, defying medical explanation. Today, in Lagos's bustling restaurants and village kitchens, people still talk about Yewande's story. Some claim they can still taste that unique flavor in their memories, a taste that made them feel mysteriously happy. Others shudder at the thought of what they had unknowingly consumed. But in quiet conversations, when mothers gather to share their fears and hopes, many admit they understand. They don't condone, but they understand. Because in the space between tradition and modernity, between desperation and dignity, between love and morality, every mother knows there are choices that defy judgment. And somewhere in Nigeria, in a forest that doesn't appear on any map, they say the medicine man still waits for desperate parents, offering impossible choices that bridge the worlds of science and superstition, of right and wrong, of love and disgust. The taste of Yewande's food may have faded from memory, but the questions her story raised linger on about the limits of maternal love, the price of survival, and the complex web that connects our traditional beliefs to our modern lives. In the end, her story remains a powerful reminder that sometimes the line between right and wrong runs straight through a mother's heart.